This is ENG4E, Grade 12 Workplace English. I'd like to welcome everyone listening across the North State at Home Your Learning Center or in Bell Expressview. To call and join our class, and call 1-800-465-7144 or 737-4017 or 2983 in the Sioux Lookout, Lac Seul, and Dryden areas. Let's welcome everyone back to class today. It's our third class of the week. We are officially at the halfway point of our course. We've had 18 classes so far. We have 18 more to go. Quick reminder to those students that maybe having a bit of time and are having a hard time getting to class and getting their work in, let me know. We can always look at getting a bit of extra time. However, if you think that you're going to need a lot more time available in the course, we can register you for the summer term. So you can still keep participating in our class here on the radio, but you can withdraw and go in the summer term. It works the exact same. The book novel is the exact same. The only difference would be that you would have until August 21st to complete your course. So instead of the 19th of June, you would have until the 21st of August. So it's something to keep in mind. It may be an option for some students. What we're going to be doing today is we are going to be finishing up reading our novel. We're going to read the rest of the novel. There's not much left, but it's really good. And then we're going to get into our activities for lesson number 9. So we will get those started today. We'll finish the novel today, but I don't think that we will get the entire... I don't believe we'll get the entire unit or lesson finished today. So we'll have to finish that up probably in class tomorrow. Our goal is to have all of lesson 9 done no later than the end of tomorrow's class, if possible. So with that said, we're going to jump back to where we were before. So we're in the middle of chapter 20. We're in the middle of chapter 25. And this is pretty much the climax of the story. Tiffany's running from home, threatened suicide, run off from home. Pierre has tracked her down, and now he's talking about what his life is like. How she thinks her life's so horrible, yet talks about what's happened to him. I think it ties in this also is that fact that Pierre hasn't fed in a long time. And because his body's telling him that he should feed on Tiffany, but he's refusing to do it. So it's some of the interesting things that are going on with the novel. So we're picking where we left off. We're at the, I'm not sure we are in the novel itself. I'll tell you in a second. Up on the screen, if you're on Bridget, you'll see we are on the right-hand side, getting where it says a small fire created a cocoon of light and heat. Okay, so we are on page page 202 in our course novel. We're near the end of chapter 25, or on page 202 of the novel. So it says, a small fire created a cocoon of light and heat. Wanting to help, Tiffany pulled an old log over, and they sat on it. She sat with her legs facing the fire, in the hopes of drying her pants and warming up her numb legs. Across from her sat her new friend, letting the light and the memories flood over him. Finally semi-comfortable, Tiffany felt a lot better. The feeling was returning to her toes. If I had something to eat, things would be just fine. Almost immediately, a jar of bread and butter pickles appeared in front of her, resting on Pierre's hand. I thought he might be a little bit famished. I'm sorry, but it's all I could grab on such short notice. They seemed to be everywhere. You want? Darn right I want. Eagerly, Tiffany grabbed the jar and forced open the lid. Sloppily, her fingers dug out a handful of pickles and quickly shoved them in her mouth. Watching her eat the pickles with so much satisfaction reminded Pierre of his own situation, and he quickly looked away, uncomfortably aware of the emptiness in his stomach and the potential for tragedy that always hovered around him. Perhaps I should go brought a fork, commented Pierre. Timmy shook her head, but was quite content. She picked out a few more before she tried to speak between chews. Maybe I'm turning into my grandmother, she said, licking her finger. I'm sorry, you said you were hungry too. Tiffany offered the jar to Pierre, who declined. No, thank you. I'm not fond of pickles, but you enjoy. And she did. Looking into the fire, Pierre thought about his next words. He had promised the girl a story. He'd amassed quite a few of them over the years, but he knew the one he should be telling her. One of those stories that was too wild to be true, but you never knew it could have happened. Those make the best stories. He took a deep breath, deciding on how to begin. This story was told me by my great-grandfather. The one that was from here? Tiffany interrupted. He nodded. Yes, that one. This is a story that supposedly happened a long, long time ago. Nobody really believes it happened, but I do. And I swore it was true. Or he swore it was true. Tiffany leaned forward. Granny Ruth says all her stories are true, too. Perhaps. As long as 300, even 350 years ago, things were very different. The white man had not yet come to this part of the country. And when they did arrive, they were poor, often starving, looking to get rich off furs and gold. If they could find any. In many places, the native people held the balance of power. In most cases, they helped the white man survive, at least in this country, preventing him from starving, dying of scurvy, and things like that. Yeah, I remember reading about stuff in history, said Tiffany. But your history books won't have told you this one time. A very young man, maybe a little older than you, from a small Anishinaabe village similar to the one you stood here, was bored with life, even though he was still very young, and wanted adventure. One day, he decided to go with a French trader back to the stranger's country to see what could be discovered. He wanted to see more than his village offered. He snuck away without telling his parents. He was young and already thought he knew everything. As he told his story, Pierre's mind wandered back to the long-forgotten adventures of famous and not-so-famous people he had met. Of all the places his eyes had seen, ranging from the cold steppes of Russia to the rugged beauty of Scandinavia, all the way down to the warm sands of the Mediterranean. He had made few friends over the years, his very nature forcing him into a life of solitude. But occasionally there would be a warm light in a cold window. There was Karl in Austria, who introduced him to the game of chess, Jose, who taught him to bullfight by the light of the moon on a warm spring, and Sarah in Scotland, who had saved his life by allowing him to stay in her barn as the sun began to rise. He verbally painted their pictures with the warmth of distant memories. And yet in Europe, there was always seemed to be a war. Somebody was always fighting somebody. There were lots of death, destruction, and horror, more than anything he could have imagined in his childhood. Every square inch of the land of that continent had been fought over, sometimes several times, ever since people had started to record such things. His own brutal acts seemed pale in comparison. He remembered a time in Switzerland where he had been caught in a blizzard for 2 nights and was desperate. He found haven with a small thatched house high in the mountain, and sustenance from the family that lived or had lived there. On the shores of Sicily, gazing towards far off shores of Africa, he came upon a sailor on the beach who had been fortunate enough to survive a shipwreck, but not his encounter with Pierre. Another time, pursued by peasants in a now forgotten country, he had been forced to take refuge in a crowded soldiers' garrison and, for a short period of time, live off the horses in the stable. Every once in a while, in a crowded street, on a lonely beach, or through a frost-tinted window, he would occasionally catch a glimpse of somebody who, for a split second, was the spitting image of the now long-departed Anne. Then the guilt would once again flow through him. Of all the atrocities he had committed in his travels, that first one, the only woman in that cursed country who had shown him any affection, was the one he regretted the most. He remembered all of this and told the girl, holding back nothing. Glad to get rid of himself of the memories, he talked and talked, weaving such an intricate story that the girl almost felt she was actually there, or, at the least, that Pierre L'Errant had been there. At times she was scared, the stories of hundreds of thousands of lives being taken brutally to quench the thirst of the dark killer. But Tiffany could also feel the longing of this wanderer, the pain of not being able to return home. After significant eternity, Pierre stopped talking, and only the crackle of the fire could be heard. Chapter 26. Tiffany had listened to every word Pierre had told her, amazed. His vivid descriptions and passionate delivery almost made it seem like he had been there. This was better than any book she'd ever made her study at school. A native vampire? That is so cool. Unknown to Tiffany, Pierre had a lemon-sized rock in each hand, and he was squeezing them firmly. He was using almost all of his strength to tell the story, and what was left over to squeeze the rock so he could not be aware of her proximity and her blood. Amid the crackle of the fire, he could hear the thump-thump of her young heart, pumping buckets and buckets of blood through her body. He squeezed the rocks harder, feeling one splinter in his right hand. Without Tiffany seeing, Pierre tossed a shattered rock aside, then added a scrap of wood to the fire. He struggled to pick up the story. Think of his predicament. He was trapped in a foreign continent, so he spent what seemed like an eternity wandering Europe, learning, seeing, experiencing, and, more importantly, trying to lose himself in the crowd. Not to draw attention to himself. This goes on for hundreds of years. Tiffany threw some twigs in the fire, sending sparks into the sky. For a moment, it made Pierre's eyes appear to be glowing again. He seemed to be staring her, or through her. Why don't you just find a way to go home, then? It was too dangerous. Travel by boat was always hazardous. No telling what time of day the boat would dock. And while a part of him longed to return to the land he once knew, another part of him was afraid. He wanted the land and the people he left behind to remember him as he was, not as he had become. So he was trapped. So how does the story end? Pierre could see her anxious breath in the night air. Everybody and everything reaches a certain point in life where mere existence isn't enough. He becomes bored. Tiffany laughed. A bored vampire? A bored native vampire? You would think of vampires as getting bored. Look at it this way. Boredom is to you as a small stream or creek, a minor inconvenience they put up with till something more interesting happens later in the day. To him, boredom was an ocean, a chasm that just got bigger and bigger. He'd seen everything, done everything, and there was nothing left to keep his interest. The world was changing, and he wasn't. Sadly, there was no end in sight. He was very bored. Around them, the woods were silent. It was as if the animals of the forest were waiting to hear how Pierre's story turned out, too. So does he come home? The man was silent for a moment, watching the dying fire. Then he stood up and faced the young girl. Yes, he does. He finds a way to return home, to die. Among his people, there is an understanding of how the circle of life operates. With every death, there is a birth. He understands this, and since he was born in that far-off village, that was where he should end his existence. Even though he had been wandering the world for hundreds of years, he was still native deep down inside, and it was very important for him that he return home as a native man. So as such, there were ceremonies to observe and preparations to make. For instance, before he left this world for the next, he wanted to fast to purify himself, as was the custom of his people. Tiffany looked at him funny, comprehending the story. Fasting? You mean he didn't drink anybody's? Yes, although it was hard. Very hard. And there was a proper time came. He planned to find a spot that was special to him and watch the sun rise for the first time in a dozen lifetimes. Guess it will be sad if it wasn't a vampire. You don't often feel sorry for vampires. She was quiet for a moment, like at the forest. The story bounced around in her head, and she thought about the poor man. This story, more than just a plain old ghost story, isn't it? Maybe, maybe not. That's the sign of a good story. A mysterious native man from Europe showing up and hanging out in the dark. Big dark cloud hanging over his head. Sounds familiar, she said playfully. Pierre smiled a distinctive smile, though it seemed with pain. Maybe you heard the story before, but it's late. I told you the story because I believe you and this bored native vampire, as you call him, have much in common. You both have responded to incidents in your lives rather drastically. Bad and misdirected decisions are made. However, as you've told me repeatedly, it's none of my business. Tiffany didn't believe him and told him so. You don't care if I kill myself or not. It was unthinkable that he didn't care. In fact, in the last hour or so, she had grown to like Pierre l'Errant and his unusual ways. The possibility that she didn't matter to him had never entered her mind. Until now. It's been a long time since I cared for what anybody does. It's been my experience that youth often only listen to themselves. Just remember, a lot of people die every day, mostly against their will. It's a great disrespect to them to choose it so frivolously. But Tiffany couldn't see his face in the darkness of the waning fire. But what? But if you want, I will help you. In a fraction of a second, if not quicker, grabbed the girls by both arms, easily lifting her into the air and slamming her against a giant oak tree. Tiffany was more than startled. Her breath was forced from her body by the impact, and the shock of the split-second moment left her stunned. Pierre's dark face hovered unnervingly close to hers. Do you want to die? I can arrange that quite easily. His breath was raspy, like he had a bad cold. And the young girl had an odd thought for a dangerous predicament. Tomorrow, if she survived. She had to wear a long-sleeved shirt, at least for a few days, because her shirt is going to be a half-broken branch sticking to her butt right now. She definitely had bruises on her shoulder and her arms come the morning. For a second, neither said a word. All that could be heard was Pierre's forced breathing and Tiffany's panicked gasps. Pierre, are you going to hurt me? She was amazed she could get the words out. Not moments ago, they had been having a great conversation. Now, he literally had her in the palms of his hands. Pierre was silent. Tiffany, though terrified, marveled at his strength to keep her suspended a good foot and a half off the ground for such a long time, with no visible strain. Abruptly, Pierre looked up to the sky, and just as quickly let go of the young girl and dropped her to the ground, disappearing into the forest with surprising speed. As he dissolved in the darkness, the young girl thought to hear him saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Tiffany found herself rubbing her shoulder as she got to her feet. Pierre? She looked upwards as Pierre had done and noticed the northern lights had come out. It was unusual to see them so strongly in the fall. High above Otter Lake, they danced and flickered as they always had, and always would. Tiffany quickly weighed her options. Not long ago, she was seriously considering ending it all. But not more than a minute ago, someone offered to kill her. During that moment, she had the revelation. She didn't want to die. Part of her was still concerned about Pierre. But the other part of her could feel the bruises beginning to develop on her arms. And Tiffany concluded that maybe she should get the heck out of there. He was gone, and the night had swallowed him whole, and she found herself alone in the bush, with visions of vampires still very fresh in her mind. Too fresh, like maybe one was out there loitering, waiting for her. Scared, she started to run. She didn't know where she was scared of. Maybe it was Pierre, maybe it wasn't. The only problem was she didn't know where to run to. She went a dozen steps in one direction, then 2 dozen in another. All the time she kept running into trees, brushes, muddy patches, and a variety of other wood-related objects. Then off in the distance she heard a wolf howling. There hadn't been a wolf in the area since long before she was born. Now panicked, she ran full tilt in the direction of her house. All thought of depression and suicide frightened out of her mind. Then suddenly Tiffany went down, screaming in pain, falling over a rock and hitting her head. A few decades back, when the Otter Lake Band Office had contemplated doing some farming, they had piled all the visible stones to a boundary fence. It was very picturesque in the daylight, but invisible at night. Subconsciously, Tiffany knew it was there. She climbed over 1,000 times in her life, but she had miscalculated in her terrified haste. The result being a large 176 million granite boulder being rudely attacked by a 16-year-old Shin. If the night could have gotten any worse, it just did. Favoring her injured leg and rubbing her left temple, she let out a scream of primordial frustration and rage. All the animals within the range rolled over in their dens, annoyed. When she was finished, she heard footsteps walking along the rock fence. Feel better? She could barely make out his outline. You're not going to hurt me again, are you? The dark figure kneeled down beside her, with his left hand supporting her weight on the nearby stump. No, I will not harm you. Good, because I think I'm already hurt already. You're not hurt. You're bruised. You're not going to do anything weird like bite me or anything, she asked. Pierre noticed the blood slowly dripping from her head. For a moment he was memorized. No, I will not. I am not well. I paused from my earlier weakness. They ripped some moss from a nearby rock and lightly wiped the blood from her forehead. To Tiffany, it seemed to stare at it for an unusually long time, but eventually he dropped it. Besides, I thought you didn't care what happened to you. I don't want to be alone out here. Would you like me to take you home? She nodded, and he lifted her up and jumped down to the other side of the fence. Then I will take you home. Carrying her, he walked through the woods, carefully negotiating a path. Tiffany marveled at his ability to make his way through the bushes, especially in the dark. Did you see the northern lights? I saw them. Pretty, huh? You realize when we get back, I'm in deep, deep trouble. Perhaps, but it shall pass. As I said, there's boredom and then there's boredom. Same with trouble. On a global scale, your father's anger is quite minuscule compared to the real tragedies out there. Besides, do you have an alternative? A branch of some sort slapped her face, making her wince. Good point. They were the last she had. Besides, might be some Indian vampires out here. Don't want to run into any of them. I hate hickeys. By the time they got back to the hunter home, it was quite late, almost dawn. As they approached, they noticed the house was ablaze with lights, and that Keith's truck was gone. Guess Dad's out looking for me. Pierre simply nodded as he went up the back steps to the deck. He put her down and reached into the open patio door. Tiffany pulled something out of her pocket. Pierre, I don't know if this will mean anything to you, but if you want, you can have this. Puzzled, Pierre took what appeared to be a necklace from her. He could tell right away what it was. Wicca root. Yeah, it belonged to my boyfriend, but I took it back. I mean, you gave me the airheads, right? I suppose it's good for what ails you. Pierre gripped it tightly in his hand. I remember. Thank you. He opened the door. Inside, they saw Granny Ruth sleeping in her big stuffed chair, quietly wheezing, her knitting still on her lap. The guilt hit Tiffany. Look at her. She should be up in bed. This isn't good for her. And it's because of me. Should I wake her up? Pierre shook his head, and some pine needles fell out of his hair. She looked safe enough at the moment. I go look at those wounds of yours first. Clean the dirt out. I think your night has been difficult enough, don't you? Tiffany didn't bother to answer, knowing it wasn't necessary. She disappeared into the bathroom, limping severely, and Pierre heard the water running. Then he turned his attention to the sleeping grandmother. Her head was rolled down onto her chest, a little off to the right. Her glasses were dangerously close to falling onto the floor. Pierre took the glasses off and placed them on the coffee table. She mumbled something in her sleep, and her head fell back. Pierre stood there, watching her, seeing the bone structure in her face of a people he thought he'd left behind long ago. Silently, he leaned forward and whispered into her ear. It was a private message, meant for her ears only. And he spoke it in Anishinaabe. In her sleep, she smiled and responded, talking in a language she thought she'd never hear again. In the bathroom, Tiffany thought she heard Granny Ruth mumbling something. Drying her hands, she limped out to investigate, but her grandma was still asleep. Pierre was nowhere to be seen. Pierre, she whispered, not wanting to wake her grandmother. But the house was silent. Pierre! Oh well, she thought. She'd see him later. Man, he was strange. A great storyteller 1 minute and terrifying the next. Still hobbling, she returned again to the bathroom, this time for a couple of aspirins for her headache. Then it was time for bed. Dawn was only about an hour or so away. She flicked the switch and the bedroom light quickly flooded with light. She grabbed her favorite worn-out t-shirt for sleeping and put it on. Off went her shoes, which had definitely seen their last days. Tomorrow, she once again faced the wrath of the shiny black shoes. But that experience would probably pale in comparison to dealing with her father. A necessary evil, she figured, but she remembered correctly, tomorrow was Monday. Actually, it was already Monday. And school was in a couple hours, and there was a history test she had barely studied for. Terrific. But as Pierre said, there are worse things in the world. Dressed for bed, she returned to her grandmother, still sound asleep, with a content smile on her lips. Tiffany wondered what secret dream she must be having. She placed a gentle kiss on Granny Ruth's face before getting her hand on her shoulder and shaking her. Granny, wake up. It's time to go to bed. A mile away, on a small rock platform high near the top of the drumlin, sat a man stripped to the waist. In front of him was a bowl containing burning sage, a tiny pile of tobacco on a rock beside it. The sun would rise in a few minutes, and he was ready and eager to see it. Way off in the distance, he could see the small island where he'd left those two idiots who'd accosted him the night before. He had been sorely tempted to deal with them in a much harsher manner, but they would have interfered with his plans for fasting. Instead, they would have woken up naked amid the moist, lush foliage of poison ivy. Elders are often called upon to teach those younger than themselves lessons, and there are no elders older than him. Smiling broadly, the man started to chant an ancient song. It was practically light already, but the sun had not yet appeared to take him home. Around his neck was a thin strip of leather holding some wicca root. To the north, he heard a sudden volley of gunshots. The hunters were busy. The ducks had finally arrived on their journey. Well, another journey was ending. Then, after so long, Pierre l'Errant saw the sun peak boldly above the horizon, and it was glorious. And that's the end of our novel. There's a couple of acknowledgements. This is stuff the author wanted to add in just to give a bit more background to the novel and how he wrote it. So it says, as with most lyric creations, regardless of their origins or substance, books are seldom born in vacuum or desert. Like alchemy, they are many different elements that go in the cauldron to synthesize what you hold in your hands. Therefore, there are many people I would like to thank who have offered me the ability to write a story such as this. Since Pierre l'Errant and Tiffany have been kicking around for almost 15 years, it's only fitting to go back to the beginning. The Night Wanderer, a native Gothic, began as a play, a contemporary Gothic Indian vampire story, commissioned by Young People's Theatre in Toronto, originally produced by Percival Theatre in Saskatoon. From there it lay dormant for a substantial period of time. I always felt it never really metamorphosed into what I imagined. Perhaps it was even then I knew the story needed a bigger reality, a bigger universe to exist. Then a Nick Press came knocking on my door for a different project, but you can't keep a good vampire down, it seems. Or a good Ojibwe teenager, for that matter. Both Pierre and Tiffany raised their hands, saying, hey, what about us? Don't forget us. Fast forward a year, and I find myself sitting in the mountains at cabin number 4 of the Leighton Studios at the Banff Center for the Arts. If you ever get the chance, come here and write a book. You'll love it. No vampires and very few Ojibways prowl these woods. The recommended grant from the Ontario Arts Council also helped foster the creative process. After actually compiling and creation of the book, there were several people who provided much valuable assistance. Success of this book is to the credit is mine. First, Trish Warner, who provided me the various medical details. Tara Redican, who gave me a good boost by providing some vital early research. A special thanks to Janine, who put much heart and soul in the book as I did. It's coming creative with our patient passion. Speaking of passion, thanks to my editors, Barbara Pulling, Pam Roberts, and Heather Sangster, who helped me not get a better writer. Like, and he had not for assistance with several of the Ojibwe phrases. And of course, I offer entire thanks to my mother. Through the simple action of birth, allowed me the opportunity to write this book. So the niche genre of Ojibwe people of the world, and to a lesser extent, all the vampires of the world. You know who you are. Drew Hayden Taylor. So that is our course novel. So we're going to jump into our unit now. And we are going to pick it up at lesson number 9. So the first thing we have is key question 32. These are 6 reading comprehension questions that I want you to work on today. Read them over, and they'll give you guys a chance to get started with them. So, if you want to finish reading chapters 20 to 27, which we just did, and complete the questions. So, number 1. This is an opinion question based on what you read. If you become a vampire, do you stop being yourself and become someone else? Yes or no? And explain your answer for 4 marks. Number 2 says, why was Pierre having trouble controlling himself? That's for 3 marks. Number 3 says, why is Pierre trying to talk to Tiffany? What's going on there? There's a couple different answers there, a couple different layers. Try and think about that and think it through. The answer to these questions cannot be copied straight from the novel. You have to think about them, come up with your own ideas, your own beliefs, and go from there. Number 4 says, why do Pierre or Owl have in common with Tiffany? What are some similarities? Do you think that Tiffany suspects who Pierre is? Why or why not? There's no right answer to this question. It's just, what do you think? Do you think she gets it or not? She doesn't come out and say specifically he is a vampire, but she gives hints that thinks she could or she doesn't get what he is. What do you think? Do you think she knew already? Yes or no? And what happened to Pierre at the end of the novel? How would you describe what he did? Why did you call it that? That's to the end. So I want to give you, let's see, about 5 minutes to get started with these questions. Try and get going with them. Read them over, get some answers going. If you're stuck, let me know. We'll take a bit of a break. We'll come back. We'll look at key question 33, and then we'll end class. Your homework tonight will be to complete key question 33. So look at 32 for now. We'll take about 5 minutes. We'll come back and we'll talk about it a bit. I'll talk to you in a bit. We're going to chance to get started with key question 32. Any questions with that, be sure to let me know. I'll be in the office all day tomorrow. But I do have to let you know that the Wausau office will be closed on Friday. We are having a whole staff PD day. So the office will be closed. I won't be in the office. And then a reminder that Monday is a holiday. It is the long weekend, the Victoria Day weekend. So the office is closed. So our next class after tomorrow will be on Tuesday. We only have 3 classes next week, and then we will be into the second last week of classes. So with that, we're going to jump now into key question 33. So this is your double entry journal. So you want to finish the last couple entries. For this entry for your journal, you can probably look at having probably about 4 or 5 entries. There's a lot of information about Tiffany that comes out in chapter 24 and in chapter 26. There's a lot of information we learn. So look about adding a bit more to that. Now, so you want to try and complete today. We will be using your entire double entry journal from lessons 3, 6, 7, 8, as well as this one, tomorrow to complete a character sketch or to go through a physical description of Tiffany. So you can see that on the next page there, on page 21. It says a character sketch is a written description of a character. Look at their physical appearance, their emotions, and emotional state, as well as their mental state. It also looks at their personality and the conflict that they're involved in. Your points must be supported by the quotes and analysis you wrote about in your double entry journal. So we will spend most of, so probably spend the entire class tomorrow looking at this character sketch. It is probably one of either the biggest or the second biggest writing assignment for this entire unit. It will take you some time to do. That's why we're planned so you can do it over the long weekend if you have time. But that's what we will be looking at tomorrow. So other than that, we'll pretty much where we're going to need to be for today. A reminder, WAS is closed Monday, and we're closed Friday. As well, we only have 3 days of class next week. I will be traveling to Sachago Lake. Sometime it'll probably end up being during week 8, the first week of June. I will be traveling up to Sachago Lake for a community visit with Jovi and Doug. I'll let you know when that happens. Classes will be canceled at that time, but I will let you know when it's going to be. Other than that, working double entry journal, we'll use that tomorrow to do your character sketch. Until then, everyone have a good night, miigwech, and bye for now.